Over 4 years ago, I went to work at a warehouse in a small town that I'm from. I decided to leave after my health started to get worse physically, and I was diagnosed with panic disorder and severe anxiety after the situation that I'm about to tell you. This changed the way that I developed friendships after that job, that's for certain. So, I started this job on April Fool's Day of 2018, which was odd to me, and I had no kind of high expectation of the job. All I wanted was to do my job, get paid, and go home as I had 2 children at home, and many things that I could work on there. The job wasn't hard, and it made pretty good money for all the duties considered, so I really couldn't complain. I worked second shift for about 5 months, and I went to day shift. While working on second shift, I kept to myself mostly, until one day I met someone from one of the lines after we stuck up a conversation about gaming. For the sake of anonymity, we'll name him JF. Well, JF was a pretty good guy and we had a lot of things in common. I went home that night and he popped up as suggested friend on Facebook. Again, another oddity. So I decided to add him. When I did, we started talking more at work until he suggested that we should hang out, so we did. Pretty frequently, in fact. We were friends for a month at this point, and one day he decided that he was going to introduce me to his partner. She seemed decent at first, super nice, didn't seem to be a judgmental type, so I was cool with her. From then on, I would hang out with him when my kids were spending time with my mother. One time we were talking at a restaurant, and he started to vent to me. Dude, she's such a so-and-so sometimes. The other day I forgot to take the trash out and she threatened to stab me if I didn't. I've never been in a relationship where someone's threatened me, but she's got good intentions, dude. When he said that to me, I was concerned, but of course we had only been friends for a month or so. I thought that maybe he was being morbid jokingly, so I sort of chuckled at him. He gave me a pretty serious look and said, "I'm not joking, she really did." And that obviously concerned me. Fast forward about 8 months. They're still together and we all hang out pretty regularly, forgetting the things that he told me then. One day we were all talking and he seemed a little off that day, so I asked him what was wrong in front of her. He flashed a smirk and said, "Nothing, dude, I'm just a little tired." He didn't have his eyes on me though. He had them on her when I asked that. When he went to work the next day, I asked him again, "Do you promise to keep this between us?" "Of course," I agreed. He said that he was breaking up with her and she apparently went a little bit crazy. He said that she grabbed her gun and pointed it at him and said, "If I can't have you, then no one will." He said that he defused the situation and is trying to look for a way out. And, not really knowing what to say, I just said, "You'll figure it out, man. If you need somewhere to go, then you can come and stay with me until you get her out of the house." Fast forward another year, he finally decided to leave her. When he did, she flipped out again. This time, he told her over text, and she said that she was going to find him and kill him, and he was actually out of work that day with a vacation day. He sent me a text that said, "Hey, let me know if she comes over to work looking for me." That struck me as odd because I had no idea of the situation that was unfolding at that time. She actually did come to our job as well, and she asked me where he was, and I said, "I have no idea. I thought he was with you and you guys went out of town or something." All she did was roll up her window and drive off. I called him and I told him that she came by and he called the police about it. They had found her up the road with a loaded gun in the car. 2 months later, he decided to talk to her again, and when he did, he had something to tell me. When he called me, he asked if I had seen her around, and I hadn't. He said, "I would take some vacation days if I were you." Dumbfounded, I asked him why, and he said to me, "Because she's out of jail and her cousins are in town trying to find the people that she had personal vendettas with. You're one of them." At that point, I was terrified. I grabbed my kids and I immediately went out of town. I took 2 weeks off of work, and I come to find out that the next day, her and her cousins went to the next town over and shot 3 people in an apartment and killed them. I got the news about it the day after it happened. The reason why he knew that they were coming after me is because they made a Facebook Messenger group that he was included in and sent a list of names. Everybody regarded it as spam and decided to disregard the message, but he knew what it was. 3 of the names on that list were people that they shot. The 4th name on that list, well, it was mine. After they found the evidence and he decided to go public about the group and screenshots that he had, they were all charged with first-degree murder. From then on, I was very careful about who I would stick my neck out for, because even though he knew the context of that list and her intentions, he decided to not inform anyone else on it. Needless to say, we aren't friends anymore, and I dodged a bullet. Literally. So to start this, I feel like it needs a little bit of backstory. At the time, I was 12 years old, almost 13, and I was spending the day at my grandma's house. Just to set the tone as well, my grandma lives in a not-so-good part of town. Her house is pretty much the highlight of that neighborhood. That day, me and my best friend Izzy, we're taking a walk to go to the park that was in the area. This was common for us to do, and we were quite used to the walk to get there. From time to time, we would get creepy encounters, but nothing like this. So as we were walking to the park, we passed this very old apartment complex. For reference, there's broken windows, tarps all over the doors, all the brick was breaking down, that sort of thing. We never really saw anyone outside of those apartments ever, until that day. There was an older couple, maybe mid to late 40s, sitting on the sidewalk in lawn chairs. We haven't seen them around before, so immediately I took notice. When the woman noticed me and my friend, she smiled and waved. The gesture seemed innocent enough, and being the nice person that I try to be, I smiled and waved back. We kept walking until she had said, "Hey, stop for a minute. I just want to talk to you. Where are you headed where you have to leave so quickly?" After she said that, my friend side-eyed her so hard and looked me dead in the face and said, "Let's go. I don't get good vibes from these people." I just shrugged and said okay. So instead of answering her, we sort of slowly started continuing walking. We walked a little distance, not bothering to look back, until I could sense the fact that we were being followed, so I turned around, and there she was, the same lady that we had just run into trailing us. Once she noticed that I had seen her, she began to wave us over, specifically me, and so I nudged my friend to show her what she was doing. We were obviously pretty creeped out by this, so my friend told me to go and see what she wants, but stay somewhat close and entertain her while she calls my grandma to come and pick us up from the area that we were in, as she was following us and we no longer felt safe. Was this a good plan? No, but at the time it seemed like it was. So I handed my phone open to my grandma's contact while I head over to see what she wants, since she was specifically motioning for just me to come over. As I approached her, she started talking. "Why did you try to get away so fast? I really mean no harm. I just thought you little ladies were simply adorable, and I wanted to find out more, especially about you. Me and my husband have taken quite an interest in you." I don't remember exactly what was said, but it was along those lines. I remember that I was so taken aback by what she said, all I could do was sort of nod and stare. Then she started asking me questions such as name, age, grade, school, etc. Obviously, I didn't give her any of my real information. Thank the Lords that I was smart enough to know that. Once she seemed satisfied with the answers that I gave her, she started speaking again. "You know, you really are a darling little thing. Me and my husband can't have any more children, and the one baby that we did have, it died at only a few weeks because she was born early. She had the exact same bright blue doe eyes. I admittedly did feel bad for her, so I just said something along the lines of, "I'm sorry for your loss, but I have to be going now." That's when things got really weird though. She then said, "Now, Angel, that's no way to talk to your mummy. Tell your friend it's time to go home and come back inside with mummy and daddy." At that point, I flipped the heck out and just turned around and started walking towards my friend with pleading eyes to help me out of this situation. She was still on the phone with my grandma, obviously. As this was only over the course of 5 or so minutes, she couldn't save me at that moment. But I just kept inching closer to her, trying to get away from this really weird lady. That was until she grabbed me, like literally tugged my arm and pulled me into her, grabbed my jaw and made me look her in the face, and then said, "Honey, enough of this. What's going on with you? Just come home with mummy and daddy. You're our little angel baby, and God's way of giving her back to us." I looked at her like she was crazy, and managed to get out of her grip, and finally stood up for myself. "Look, lady, I'm sorry for your loss, but I'm not in any way related to you, nor am I your child, so please just leave me alone," I said as assertively as possible, given my terrified state. I again tried to walk away, and this time she grabbed me again, harder, and started walking back towards the apartment with me. At that point, my friend came running over and started trying to help me the best that she could from this crazy lady, since she was also only a 13-year-old girl. Then, by some miracle, my grandma finally pulled up, and that seemed to scare the lady away. And when I tell you that we ran into the car, I can barely describe it accurately. We moved like lightning. My grandma asked what had happened, to which we told her, and she decided that she would inform the police. They didn't end up doing much of anything really, as we didn't know the names of these people and all we could really give them was a description. And when they looked into the apartments and who all lived there, the couple did not actually live there obviously, and the other people from the apartment have never seen them before based on description. This happened about 5 years ago now, and it still really scares me and makes me wonder about what their intentions were. Was I almost kidnapped? Was she just really crazy? Am I overreacting, and was it just an innocent encounter? Or was there something evil about to happen? I was a 20-year-old college student, and my friend and I were living and working near her college for the summer. A guy that she worked with, he invited us to a party at his place. The two of us went, along with 3 other friends. We turned out to be the only females at that party. There were at least twice as many guys there. After drinking and playing a few drinking games, people started to leave. A large group of guys was invited to another party and left to go there. Then our 3 other friends decided to go too. It was down to the host, my roommate, and 2 other guys. For some reason, maybe we ran out of alcohol, I can't remember, we decided to go to this other party. Now at this stage, I had had a few drinks, but not enough that I was seriously impaired or anything. My roommate, though, was pretty tipsy by this point. She was walking with her friend from work, and the other 2 guys who had been talking to me at the party were walking close to me and talking to me. At one point, my friend and her coworker were walking far enough from us to be out of earshot. The 2 guys told me that they knew of a shortcut and tried to get me to follow them down a dark alleyway. I told them that I wanted to stick with the group. They tried to persist for a few minutes, but I was adamant that I did not want to be separated from my roommate. Somehow, mysteriously too, we never actually found the party. The details are a bit fuzzy, but I think they couldn't find the exact location or something. This was the mid-90s, so no one had a cell phone to call or a text to confirm a location or anything. My roommate told her coworker that she wanted to walk around to find another party because she wasn't ready to go home yet. There were lots of people out, and often you would run into someone who would invite you somewhere. I told her that I just wanted to go home at this point. I was pretty desperate to get away from those guys, actually. My roommate was feeling good though, and just was not having it. The two guys started to whisper to one another at this point, and I was able to hear some of what they were saying. One said, "No, you didn't hear what she said. They live with 4 guys." This was true as well. We had 4 male roommates, which at some point had come up in the conversation earlier. This immediately set off more alarm bells. I continued to argue with my friend, and eventually she realized that we weren't going to find another party. The 2 creepy guys left, and her coworker walked us home. On the way home, I told them that I wanted to leave because those guys were scaring me and why. If this were to happen today, I would have called those guys out in front of everyone, and I would have made more of a scene, I guess. I'm just thankful that I still had enough awareness to not go down that alleyway with those guys, because if I had, I really don't know if I would still be here. So this is mostly going to be told from my friend's perspective, based on what she told me. For context, we were at a casino in Las Vegas and had been drinking and gambling pretty much all night. It was around 1 a.m. and we were getting ready to play one more game of roulette before heading back to the hotel. My friend needed to use the bathroom, but I wanted to keep playing, so I let her go by herself. I wish that I had went with her, but I'll now tell the story directly from her point of view. I went to the bathroom, and as I was making my way back, a guy approached me with this really creepy grin on his face. He appeared to be alone and was recording me with his phone. He walked up to me and said, "Hey sexy, do you have a boyfriend?" I said yes and kept walking, keeping my head down, and he proceeds to follow me while recording on his phone. He asked me if my boyfriend was here with me, and I said yes, he's over there, and pointed to where I was sitting. He responded by saying, "Oh my goodness, he's so average looking. You could do so much better." I just ignored him, and I started walking faster at this point. He then said, "Can I come back to your hotel with you? I want to have my way with you." I yelled at him to leave me alone, and he started laughing like a madman. He said, "Why are you being like that?" At this point, my friend made it back to our table, and I could tell that something was wrong. This dude was still standing next to her recording, and he said, "Your girl is terrible, you know." This really ticked me off, and I got in his face and told him that if he didn't leave us alone, I was going to knock him out, and he pulls out pepper spray and started shaking it up. I jumped back and grabbed my friend, and luckily we saw a sheriff's deputy standing a few feet away, and he could tell that something was up. I flagged him down and told him what was going on, but the creepy guy was gone by this point. In fact, he completely vanished from sight. After the whole ordeal, we were exhausted, and we took a cab back to the hotel. Now, about a week later, I was on Facebook and saw an article about a guy claiming to be an incel who was arrested for going around recording himself pepper spraying and harassing women, and lo and behold, it was the same guy who harassed my friend at the casino. His name was Johnny Devan Young, for anyone who wants to look him up, but the guy gave me such a bad vibe, and I remember seeing him just walking around the casino by himself before the incident happened. It was a strange experience, and I don't know what this guy was up to really, if he was just trying to bait for reactions or what, but the fact that he invited me back to his place, that scares me a little bit. I work at a homeless shelter for men in a fairly large Midwestern city. It's rewarding work, but the pay isn't great. Listening to these guys' stories and experiences, though, leaves me feeling incredibly grateful and humble. Many are mentally ill, addicted, alcoholic, or some combination of the three. A few are truly men who are down on their luck, victims of other people's mistakes, but it's rare. Generally speaking, almost all are local, as there is literally nothing to bring you to this city besides either work or family. Which brings me to Carl. He creeped me out from the beginning. He's not from here. In fact, he's from the West Coast, which is easily a 2-day drive. He's a bit of an outdoorsy type with a kayak on top of his SUV. This made me suspicious from the beginning. Why would someone who loved the outdoors leave the West to come here? He is never drunk or high, perfectly well spoken, and no obvious mental health problems like so many of these fellow residents. His backstory makes no sense as well, but I mean, they rarely do here. He was yet another extremely rich, successful man who got screwed in some vague and never believable way and ended up homeless. In fact, the residents here are all misunderstood geniuses, musicians, brilliant salesmen, former athletes that should have been pro, etc., etc., and they all got screwed by something or someone. It's all stories, and his was really no different. Carl, though, is different. Well-spoken, worldly, extremely polite and educated. So why is he here? Is he on the run? We don't allow the police to come in looking for anyone unless we called them ourselves. It's a perfect place to hide, I guess, for someone running from something. So he's from out of state with some weird backstory of how he ended up here. I gave up the rat race, packed up, and this is where I ran out of money. Sure, bud. He's trying to befriend me, and it creeps me out a bit. Anyway, I caught him alone by the dumpsters yesterday. He was shirtless on a mat, looking like a praying Muslim or someone doing yoga deep in thought. But that's when I noticed that his tattoos were all satanic. That goat head guy on a man's body and something written in Latin. When he noticed me, he grabbed something quickly and put it in his back pocket. No idea what it was, but I told him that he couldn't be back here, and he complied. He was also chanting something I couldn't make out before he noticed me. Something about blood, I think. It was really creepy and very scary, in fact. He hasn't done anything wrong per se, and we can't kick someone out for being creepy or practicing their religion. But it's another day at the shelter now, and I have to continue to deal with this guy, and I guess I'm just wondering if you guys have any ideas as to what I should do about any of this. So, I've been up since like 5 a.m. and I just cannot get this out of my mind. Last night, I'm sleeping and I'm having a nightmare that I'm in an apartment looking into a kitchen area, and the drawers, cabinets, and a door to the pantry were all opening, closing, and moving by themselves, almost like poltergeist activity. I was scared in the dream, so I began praying, and then my wife, who was in the bed next to me, kicked my foot and woke me up because I was clearly distressed and mumbling a lot in my sleep. But here is where things get really weird. So I sort of jump awake because my wife kicked my foot, and feeling relieved to not be having a nightmare anymore, I turn my head towards my wife, who is laying behind me. I'm really sorry about that, I was having a nightmare. But I don't hear any response, so I figured that she's already fallen back to sleep or whatever, or might just be too tired and she's still kind of out of it. Then I turned my head back to facing forwards, the direction that I was facing the whole time that I was sleeping, and I noticed something in the corner of the room, standing in front of the bedroom door. The room was dark, but its skin still appeared to be like a dark matte grey colour. It was really thin, had thin legs and long thin arms, a small, almost like torso, a narrow neck, and then a really big bulbous head with huge black almond-shaped eyes. What I'm getting at is that it looked exactly like a traditional grey alien, but it was also slightly transparent. Needless to say, I was completely shocked, and to be honest, my very first reaction was that I was seeing things because I just woke up. So I sort of rubbed my eyes and it's still right there. Trying not to panic and trying to come up with a rational explanation for it, I thought to myself that this must just be a dream, like chemicals still working in my brain or something. So I sit up slightly and look into the corner of our bedroom by the closet, expecting to see something there too, but there's nothing. Then I look at the ceiling, nothing. The floor, the other wall, nothing. I look back at the corner of the bedroom and it is still right there, standing there completely still, just staring at me with its huge jet black eyes, which were shaped like almonds and appeared to sort of wrap just slightly around the side of its head, much, much larger than a human's eyes. And it's still slightly transparent, but I am definitely seeing it clearly. And only in that one spot too, not anywhere else in the room. Now, because the Texas power grid really sucks, I always sleep with a flashlight next to the bed. And after seeing this thing for about a minute and a half, it occurs to me to grab the flashlight. I lean off the bed, reach down and grab the flashlight, and shine it in the corner of the room at this being. And because it's transparent, it became much less visible when I shined the light on it, but I could still see it very slightly, but it was now much more difficult to see. Again, in disbelief at what I was seeing, I began slowly scanning the whole room with the flashlight, from the bed of course. I wasn't going to try and get out of bed, I was way too scared. And again, I see absolutely nothing strange anywhere else in the room at all, except for this thing that I can see in the one corner of my bedroom door. I turn the flashlight off and instantly I can see it super clearly again, just staring at me. I rub my eyes again and squeeze my eyes together tightly, hoping that when I open them it would be gone. But it wasn't. So I finally begin truly freaking out internally, and I just began praying out loud. After about 20 seconds of praying, I literally watched this thing just sort of fade out of existence or dematerialize right in front of me. It was still standing there dead still and staring at me the whole time. It just seemed to suddenly begin becoming increasingly transparent until it was just, well, not there anymore and it was gone. I've been awake since then, spent the rest of the night reading random stuff here on Reddit to try and distract myself because the experience really shook me up quite a bit. I was wondering if anyone else here has had an experience like this. I feel so genuinely weirded out that I just don't know what to make of it. Did I really just see that? So I read somewhere that you can see your true self in front of a mirror by using lights. Not here, of course, but just some random post on the net. As I dove deeper with that stupid post, I tried doing it. First, I just stared into the mirror for a few minutes with the lights open. Nothing happened. And yes, I did it at dawn at around 2 or 4 in the morning. I tried many things too. I literally experimented in front of the mirror as I have nothing much to do anyway. I bought different LEDs with different colors just to see my face in the mirror with different colors. I kept doing it the following days. Every time I would sit in front of the mirror, I always used different colors of lights. I did that for about 8 days straight, and nothing happened. On day number 9, though, I started to get bold and thought of using lights coming from a candle. I still doubt that something will happen, obviously, but to my mistake, just a few minutes later, something really did happen. It was 3:56 a.m. at that time. I kept a note on what time I did those stupid experiments. As I started in front of the mirror with the candle lights, things started to go from bad to worse. At first, I thought something just got into my eyes, but I know that it wasn't. That face of mine, that very reflection of my face, began to distort. I was stunned for a moment, shivering all over my body and not knowing what to do. That distorted reflection of mine began to look deeply into my own eyes, slightly smiling, a visible arc on the side of the mouth. As I was stunned and didn't know what to do because I really wasn't expecting it, I just sort of stared back at it. I tried to move, but my body wasn't listening to me. I was in that position for about 40 seconds of dread. As I was about to lose it and almost started crying, everything returned to normal. Of course, the first thing that I did was to put down that candle light and turn the lights on. I was really scared that time, but I also felt elated because, well, I succeeded after 9 days. I wasn't able to sleep properly that day, thinking that my reflection would kill me or whatever. I'm not even kidding, I was actually really scared about that. I continued with my daily routine though, except staring in the mirror again obviously, and nothing happened. But just a week ago, strange things started to happen. I've been living alone for like 3 years now, and I'm working at home too. And I know this sounds weird, but I can literally feel someone's presence when I'm working, that someone is eyeing me. Sometimes I see some black hazy figure on my peripheral vision, but when I turn to look at it, there's never anyone there. I got shivers most of the time, but I just kept on ignoring it. And things like that continued to happen, and just 3 days ago, when I woke up, the door to my room was slightly opened, like someone might have been peeking through the door. I just ignored it again, thinking that I must have just forgot to close it. But that kind of thing just really shouldn't happen to me because I always lock the door after entering my room. And today, the worst thing happened. My door was slightly opened again, and this time I saw a bloodshot eye peeking at my door. It was fleeting, but I know what I saw. It was that black figure again with the eyes that I saw on my reflection before with the candlelights. I'm literally shivering right now while sharing this. I'm trying to find that stupid post again so that I can do something about it, but I can't. And, as crazy as it sounds, I think that I invited an unwanted guest into my own home. If you have any ideas on what I can do about all of this, then please do let me know. I'm afraid that strange things will continue to happen and that things just seem to be going from bad to worse. So we moved to a house on Fort Drum in northern New York. We had a 3-year-old TV in my daughter's room. She was 4 at the time. She liked to watch about 20 minutes of TV each night to make her eyes tired. Every night at the end of the 20 minutes, she'd be asleep pretty much, and I would come in and turn off the TV. In this Fort Drum house, however, the TV seemed to have a bit of a mind of its own. I'd come in to turn it off, walk to my room, and then I would hear it turn back on. When I would turn around to turn it back off, it would always turn off by itself. Almost every night I would play this game with the TV. I thought that there was an issue with the timer, or maybe my daughter was laying on the remote or something, but there was just no explanation in the end. The TV was working perfectly normal a few weeks earlier in our previous home too. Anyway, after that, things would come up missing too, and they'd show up in really bizarre places. At night, particularly when my husband was working, I would hear strange bumps downstairs as well. One night, my husband was away for 24-hour duty. My daughter was asleep, and my dog and I were in the bed in the master bedroom. And all of a sudden, we heard someone slowly stomping up the stairs. I immediately thought that my husband had come home to grab something, and that I just didn't hear the door unlock or whatever. Once the stomping got about halfway up the stairs on the landing, the stomping turned into running. My dog went to the edge of the bed, wagging her tail, thinking that Dad was home probably. We, the dog and I, sat frozen in bed waiting for my husband to come through the bedroom door. We waited, but in the end, no one was there. The very next day, though, my daughter and I were talking over breakfast. She says, "I can see ghosts, you know." Me playing along, I say, "Oh, you can? That's pretty cool." "Yeah, there's one in my room at night. She's old and her ears are covered, but she has a kind face." "Oh, her name is Ruth." "Well, what does she do? Does she talk to you?" "No, she just sort of stands in my closet and watches me." My daughter didn't seem to be alarmed or frightened in the slightest. I was, but I played it cool. A few nights later, after again playing the on-off game with the TV, I was in bed and I heard the usual small bumps in the night. But then there was a huge crash. I ran downstairs to find that a wooden sign had been flung across the room and had broken a vase that we owned. At that, I started crying in fear. I sort of yelled, "You're scaring me. We have to live in this house for now. Please stop scaring me and leave us alone." And afterwards, I felt really stupid as I walked back upstairs. But interestingly enough, nothing ever happened again after that. Not even the TV. My daughter never even mentioned Ruth after that night. So, I don't know if I somehow resolved the problem or if maybe it just stopped randomly, but whatever the case, I'm glad that it all ended. This was a long time ago now, so my memories of the following events are somewhat cloudy, and the story is mostly reconstructed based on what my family has told me. This story happened in Chile during the early 2000s. So, some strange things happened in my childhood home. It wasn't a particularly old house or anything. It was built in the mid-80s, and as far as I know, no one had died there by the time that these things started to happen. Nevertheless, it was in a very old part of town, in a part where very dark things happened in the times when Spain governed over our country. Just 1 block away from my house, in fact, there was once a former lake that dried and was filled a long time ago, where the colonial authorities threw the bodies of a group of slaves that were executed for trying to return to their homes. I don't know if any of you believe in the spiritual sense of the word energies, but I certainly do, and I believe that this is a good explanation of the things that happened in my house. So sometime before I was born, my parents were having dinner with my brother and older cousins, who at that time were living in our house because they were in university in our city. My dad had made pachinga and we were all having a good time making chatter when suddenly they all heard the same thing, the cry of a baby coming from my brother's bedroom. My mother recalls that it was loud and short, just one single cry that got everyone out of the loop, and as soon as it appeared, the sound went away just as quickly. The weird thing is that there was no baby living in our neighborhood at that time. Our neighborhood consisted of 12 semi-detached houses, so it's not a far shot to theorize that it could have been a baby that stayed the night in one of the neighbors' houses or whatever, but the walls were well insulated. Also, everyone remembers that the cry wasn't muffled. It clearly sounded as if it was inside of the home. Another thing is that old TVs tended to turn off by themselves. Also, things used to get lost pretty often and then they'd just reappear in the most obvious places, usually in the places we had searched previously to the point of exhaustion. My brother, hilariously, always blamed the gnomes. But a more shocking experience happened to me when I was about 7 or 9 years old. My brother threw a party in our house with a couple of friends from university one day. I was on our old family computer, probably playing RuneScape or whatever, in the same room where the party was going on, and then I heard a woman screaming. It was one of my brother's former girlfriends. For anonymity's sake, I'll call her Carla. But she stood below the arch that leads to the living room, just in front of the stairs, staring with horror and yelling at an empty space on the wall. She began to cry, and others tried to calm her down, but it was all just in vain. She insisted on leaving, because whatever she saw had disturbed her that deeply. My brother says that once she was more calm, she claimed that she saw a man standing on the stairs, staring at her with what she described as wrath in his eyes. He was wearing a long trench coat and a cowboy hat, and everyone seemed to ignore his presence. Everyone but her, obviously. The thing that really scared her, though, was his eyes. She claimed that she sensed some kind of ineffable anger in his gaze, and then she was too scared to be in that house anymore. Understandably, she never came back either. But there is one particular encounter that I remember the most, as it is the most unbelievable and unexplainable, illogical and baffling thing, not just of these stories I've told, but pretty much of my entire life, I think. It's something that I'll never forget. So one night, not so distant from the other story, my mum wasn't at home for reasons that I don't remember anymore, and my brother had just left for a party at Carla's house. I remember him wearing a black trench coat and a brown leather hat, and so my dad and I were home alone for the night. We were on the couch watching History Channel, as usual. In those years when it was still half about history anyway, and half about aliens, antiquities, and trying to catch Bigfoot, only to find nothing at all. But I digress. When all of a sudden we heard the front door slam shut. We naturally turned our heads, and there he was, a man in a leather trench coat and leather hat. His clothing seemed almost anachronistic, out of his time. At the moment, I couldn't get a good glance at his eyes as the rim of his cowboy-like hat was sort of tilted down, but I remember he had a 3-day stubbled beard and a sharp face complexion. He was dressed almost exactly like my brother, and had the exact same beard style. I remember thinking, oh, my brother's home early. Also thinking he was my brother. My father tried to talk to him, but he just went directly upstairs, ignoring us completely. In that moment, I could get a glance of his eyes, and they just felt soulless, inhuman. I couldn't sense any evil in his eyes, like Carla's friend claimed it did, but I remember how he stomped on the steps with haste, almost with anger it seemed. I also remember thinking that the man wasn't my brother, because his face was actually not that similar at all. My dad, skeptic and stubborn as he was, still thinking it was my brother, said to himself, that guy came back home drunk again, or something along those lines. But after pondering on the strangeness of the situation, my dad asked if I remembered hearing the door being opened, but can't recall if I did, and also I'd be lying if I said I remember what I answered. Probably I just shrugged in the end, but my dad then tried to make me go upstairs to check on my brother's bedroom, but honestly, I was too scared, and so I just refused to go there alone. So finally, we both went upstairs and we entered my brother's bedroom. And behind the threshold, there was nothing but darkness. The lights were off, the windows were closed shut, and there was no sign of anybody being there. My dad checked on the closets, checked all the windows, and then checked on the other bedrooms. But we were all alone. There was no trail of this man anywhere. We went back downstairs to continue watching our show, trying to forget what had just happened, but it was just impossible. The absurdity of the situation didn't make that possible, and shortly after my brother came back home for real this time, my dad questioned him about the whole situation, asking him if he had jumped out of the window or something. My brother denied doing such a thing with an expression of bewilderment on his face. Honestly, I actually believed him at that time too, and that was that. We didn't touch the matter again, and we just moved on with our lives. Some days we would remember while watching a horror movie and say, hey, remember the hat guy? And time passed and so on and so forth. At a time I even had forgotten about the whole situation for years, and then it just simply went back into my head. I remembered the Hatman just out of the blue. According to Chilean rural folklore, the Hatman is the angel of death. To some others, he is the devil himself, and his presence is nothing but the promise of loss and misfortune. That makes sense too, because my dad's life was cut short by an anaphylactic shock when I was 12 years old. My life hasn't been the same since his death, both economically and emotionally as well. And after my dad's passing, we eventually moved away from that house. To this day as well, I still wonder if I will ever see the Hatman again. I grew up with my dad and brother because my mum died when I was 10. I was 13 at this point and my brother was 16 and was out with some friends. I used to go out until late at night drinking at the park with friends. My dad was an alcoholic and was always too drunk to know if I was at home or not. I pretty much had free rein and no rules or boundaries. My dad used to invite random alcoholic, drug-using strangers into the house. Often when I came home, these strangers and my dad would be passed out or asleep from too much alcohol, or they would barely notice that I was there and I'd go straight to my room. One day though, I would come back from being out with friends. It was the early hours and I walked through the living room to go upstairs to my room and my dad was asleep on the armchair. The guy that he had brought back was around mid-50s. I didn't recognize him. He looked at me though and something was off about him. He smiled and stared and tried to start a conversation with me, but I was just keen to go to my bedroom at this point. I went upstairs and got my pajamas on for bed, and then dashed to use the bathroom. As I was walking to the bathroom, he said to me, "You look nice in those pajamas." And he was smiling at me and sort of creeping me out too. I went back to my room instead of using the bathroom and I shut the door behind me. I had a lock on my bedroom door and I used that. He was then trying to open my bedroom door and I was scared because I knew something was off and that he probably had bad intentions. At this point, I dragged my bed across the room to block the door just in case he barged it open and broke the lock or whatever. He's knocking on the door though, saying, "I'm just trying to say hello. Don't be so rude, open the door." I'm not responding, I'm panicking in fact. I was a pretty socially aware 13-year-old and I knew here that I was in danger. The bed is blocking the door and it's still locked and I can hear him pushing against the door, trying to get inside. I open my bedroom window and I scream again and again, "Help, please help," at the top of my lungs. And what I later found out was that my neighbor heard me and, knowing my dad was an alcoholic, assumed that something had happened to him. He came around, must have seen my dad is asleep. He comes up to my room and he's knocking to get in and I can hear his voice, a voice of safety. Although I trusted my neighbor, I was so shook that I'm now just sat in the corner, bawling my eyes out, shaking and panicked. He knocks the door open and is pushing it open against the weight of the bed. He came in and checked on me, assuming that I must have been hurt or something, and he just holds me while I compose myself and try to explain what had just happened. The man was now gone, but I knew that he could come back any time in the future and that my dad was never sober enough for me to have ever been able to explain it. And this was the final straw for social services, and that was the night that I ended up in the care system. I ended up living with my auntie until I was 16, so I had it much easier than most, which, honestly, I'm very grateful for. I've always been intrigued by tales of cryptids and the paranormal, but I never had any personal experiences to share. To be honest, the lack of substantial evidence for such phenomena was actually somewhat comforting for me. Despite their fascinating aspects, these phenomena can be frightening. However, I experienced something about 10 years ago that completely shifted my perspective on the paranormal and spirituality in general. So, the short version is this. A decade ago, I reconciled with my first love after a painful separation. She was already 3 months pregnant with another man's child. Yes, it sounds like a simp story, I know, but it was a decision that I put a lot of thought into and it ultimately changed my life. Fast forward to now, we're happily married with 2 kids and our daughter is turning 10 next month. During this emotional turmoil, though, I experienced something that I can only really describe as sleep paralysis. You see, I woke up, unable to move, but I could move my eyes one night. I saw an all-black figure, featureless, crawling over my legs and towards my pregnant wife. Despite my attempts to scream or move, I was helpless. The figure reached my wife and was sitting between her legs with its hands on her legs, and I felt an intense, overwhelming dread. This horror was so profound that I awoke kicking, accidentally hitting my wife's pregnant stomach. The baby and her were okay, but we were both shaken. This happened again 3 nights later when I felt like I was being pulled under the bed this time, like head first sliding under the headboard until I was completely underneath the bed, all the time this figure was at the foot of the bed sitting. Yet again I awoke in a panic, this time hitting my wife again, but she had started placing pillows between us for protection while we tried to understand what was going on. In the days that followed, I was haunted by sudden waves of intense fear and an unshakable feeling of not being alone. Even during the day, at work or while driving, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder. The sensation was that strong. Desperate for help, I took my wife's advice and reached out to a pastor from her church. I poured out my experiences and fears to him, and he suggested a spiritual remedy. He told me to walk through our house, holding a Bible, and to rebuke the presence in the Lord's name. Definitely skeptical, but also very desperate, I ended up following his advice. So, alone in the house, armed with only a Bible and a phrase of rebuke, I did as instructed. Initially, I didn't feel any change, but then slowly, the fear began to recede. Since that day, I've never really experienced anything similar, which is definitely weird to me. Now, obviously, I can't offer a scientific explanation for what I experienced, but it was a powerful and personal confirmation that there's more to our world that we can perceive with our senses. Whether you classify it as a paranormal, spiritual, or religious experience, I chose to view this as evidence that if unseen forces of evil exist, then there must also be forces of good. Take from my story what you will, but it's good to share it and to finally get it off my chest. So I'm a nurse working mainly night shifts in a home for the elderly. There are 2 of us in the building at night. Each of us has their own floor, and there are 80 elderly in our home. Now recently, we've had a lot of palliative patients awaiting death, and badly sick patients. We've also had a few deaths in the last month, as expected of course. But as of lately, night shifts have become unbearable. Many of our patients screaming throughout the night and barely getting any sleep, ranting about seeing figures standing over them or talking to them, calling their names and saying hello. Tonight, I was sitting in our little nurse point in the dark, my desk light turned on, overseeing halls in 3 directions, typing something onto my computer. I heard a woman say hello to me, so I looked up. Everything was still and eerie, so I went out and checked the halls, but nothing. I brushed it off in the end. Maybe I was tired. I sat back down. Not even a minute passes, and somebody grabs my shoulder. I nearly jumped out of my skin. There was no one behind me, no one near me in fact, and I nearly wet myself. I ran quickly down to my coworker. She was sitting pale in her nurse station, completely still. She looked at me and told me that she had someone calling her name out of the death room. That's what we call the room where the dead are brought to await funeral services. She said that she watched the door, which is tightly shut, slowly open, and then she heard the call. Needless to say, we're both scared to death, huddled in the common room, going out to the rooms together at this point. But what should we do? Is there any way to calm things down a bit? We're practically unable to work out of fear, and there's just too many people to attend to. Should we go around with a cross or something? Light a candle? We're afraid and we need help. Calling for help is useless too, as they'll just make fun of us if we do, so we're practically stuck here. please, if you know what to do about any of this, then help us out. This happened to me about 20 years ago when I was still a sophomore in high school. My aunt and uncle, they had a 3-story condo that was always kind of off. It wasn't a particularly old or creepy looking building, in my recollection, but as soon as you set foot inside, there was something in the air that just reeked of something isn't right. For a little background too, the condo's first floor held the living and the dining areas, the kitchen, and the back door that led to a small patio. The second story was the master bedroom, 2 guest rooms, a bathroom, and a little nook for the washer and dryer. The third floor was a game room, with several old video game consoles like an Atari Jaguar and a Sega Genesis, with my uncle's Star Trek collection in one corner, and a door that led to the attic crawl space. It also had a pull-out sofa sleeper for guests. Now, as I grew up, we visited the condo many times. Like I said, the entire building had an odd aura to it, but this all culminated on the 3rd floor. When you walked over to the final stair up to the 3rd floor, the air just changed. We're on the 2nd floor that you could hear the sounds of family visiting downstairs and hear traffic outside, etc. On the 3rd floor, it was always completely silent. The air was always heavy and thick there. No sounds permeated here, and you were always left with a feeling of being stared at or watched, almost as if you were intruding there. Being kids, my cousins and I would often go up to the 3rd floor to play video games. However, we never went up there alone, and absolutely never went up there at night. It was just one of those places that felt like it was a different plane of existence, its own pocket dimension of silence and gloom. My family had seen and heard things in that condo on multiple occasions too. It was common knowledge that one could hear footsteps pacing up and down the stairs at night. You would see figures out of the corner of your eye, doors would open and close despite being locked, objects would move, that sort of thing. One morning, actually, I woke up before the adults to find a trail of pennies lying end to end from the 3rd floor all the way down to the kitchen. I remember being a little bit unsettled by this, but not particularly afraid. I was more interested in free money, I guess, and greedily put the pennies in a Ziploc baggie to take home with me. Now, because these things going on were relatively benign in nature, my family assumed that it had to be a spirit of my late grandfather, who was the mischievous sort in life, watching over the house at night. Fast forward to my teenage years though, my uncle died suddenly one year, and so a flood of tight-knit family descended on the condo to comfort my aunt and attend my uncle's funeral. Because there were so many people staying in the condo, my mum, dad, sister and I were relegated to sleeping upstairs on the 3rd floor. I was creeped out, but I figured, hey, how bad could it be, right? But boy, was I in for a surprise. So, the day of the funeral came and we all attended the wake, after which the family gathered outside to comfort my aunt, who was sobbing uncontrollably at the loss of her husband. I remember the sound being a sort of gut-wrenching, heartbreaking cry of pure despair. It really hurt to listen to, in fact, so I quickly retreated from the crowd of onlookers and went to find my cousins until we were ready to leave. And little did I know that everything was about to break loose when we got back. We got back to the condo and everyone wept and shared stories of my uncle. After some time, we all grew tired and decided that it was time for bed. I slept on the sofa, while my mum and dad and little sister all shared an air mattress down on the floor by the foot of the sofa. What I remember most about that night, though, was the cold. I startled awake in the middle of the night, unsure of what had woken me up, only to be greeted by the most bone-biting, skin-saturating cold that I'd ever felt. It permeated the entire 3rd floor as well, soaking through my clothes and into my body. I shuddered and pulled the blanket tighter around me. I remember being puzzled by the cold, in fact, as the 3rd floor usually got uncomfortably warm. I lay there, shivering for a few minutes, and that was when I heard it. The sound that I heard is hard to describe, but it's probably best described as something trying its best to mimic my aunt's sobbing from earlier. It was a dry, sort of raspy voice, crying and choking and carrying on in a sort of mocking tone, and it was extremely loud. I mean, ear-splittingly loud. It was coming from the far corner of the room as well, over by the crawl space door. I froze in terror. I mean, what on earth was going on? Was this some kind of an entity? I peeked over the edge of my blanket and gazed into the darkness at the corner of the room. Nothing, of course, was there, but my mother, having had past experiences with paranormal things, had once told me that if anything scary ever happened like that, to just ignore it and it would go away. So, remembering that, that's exactly what I tried to do. I squinted my eyes shut and I pretended to be asleep. When that didn't work, I tried covering my head with the couch cushion to blot out the sound. That didn't work either. The sound stayed as loud as it had been, almost as if it were coming from inside my own head. I lay like that for what seemed like minutes, but it was probably about 45 seconds or so. Then another noise grabbed my attention. The rustling of blankets. I peered out from under my own blanket to see my mother had bolted up onto the air mattress. She looked left and right with a sort of confused expression on her face, and then jumped up and ran down the stairs to the second floor. My father and sister were still sound asleep. This next part is what my mum told me happened after she ran downstairs. So Mum got to the second floor and immediately opened the master bedroom, thinking that my aunt was awake and crying. But no, she was actually sound asleep. Mum could still hear the wailing, so she checked all the other rooms on the second floor, but everyone was asleep. Confused, she stood at the bottom of the stairs leading to the third floor and listened to the wailing. Meanwhile, my fear had given way to curiosity. Glancing cautiously over toward the corner where the sound was coming from, I sort of leaned over the banister and gazed down to the second floor. I could see the hall light on downstairs and Mum looking bewildered at the bottom of the steps. "Mum?" I called. She nearly jumped out of her skin, her head snapping up to look at me. Are you looking for that wailing sound?" Mum's eyes widened. "You hear it too?" I nodded at this. "Why isn't anyone else waking up?" she called. I just shrugged. She then turned away from me and headed toward the stairs leading to the first floor. As she rounded the corner toward the first floor, she ran headlong into my little cousin. He was wide-eyed, in tears and shaking. Mum asked him what was wrong, and he said, "It's coming to get me." Mum began to ask what was coming to get him, when she saw it. A shadow, humanoid, came lurching up the stairs toward them, blacker than the darkness that surrounded it. As it approached, it began to sort of morph as well, to grow into something monstrous. Now standing 7 or 8 feet tall, it began lunging up the remaining stairs at them, making a horrible sound as it came. Mum grabbed my cousin and began sprinting up the stairs, the shadow stomping just behind her. This cacophony caught my attention, and now, completely ignoring the wailing in the room with me, I craned my neck over the banister to see what was going on. I saw Mum sliding around the corner toward the third floor stairs, a flood of shade and darkness filling the hallway behind her. My little cousin was screaming and clutching at her neck as she ran, taking the stairs 2 at a time. "Mum," I cried, "it's right behind you." She ran and came flying up the final few steps to the third floor, and as soon as she cleared the landing, the wailing just completely stopped, cut off like someone pulled the plug on a speaker. She leapt into the air mattress with my cousin. I abandoned all pretense of maturity and clambered onto the mattress with them. We all sat there, huddled in abject terror, staring into the darkness of the staircase. But nothing came. No shadow, no wailing, nothing. But that was when the stomping started. Up and down the stairs it went, over and over, rattling the knickknacks on the walls, vibrating the floors. Still though, nobody woke up, which was so weird to me at the time. After several minutes of this, the footsteps reached the third floor and stopped dead. The temperature in the room immediately started to plummet, and Mum clearly had had enough. She started violently shaking my father to wake up. When Dad woke up, everything just suddenly got quiet again. He was groggy and annoyed, and asked us what we were doing. We explained what had happened, my cousin still crying in my mother's arms, and he looked at us skeptically but listened intently with us for any sounds in the house. Sounds never came for the rest of that night, but none of us really slept after that, and in the morning my cousin, still visibly shaken, explained to us what had happened to him before Mum found him. He said that he heard a voice calling him from downstairs and thought that his father, my late uncle, had returned. He was young and I don't think he understood the permanence of death, I guess, but when he went down to investigate, he said that he ran into the shadow and that it was too big to be my daddy. I don't know exactly what happened that night. I've read about shadow people before, about jinn and demons, but nothing really quite matches the being or the thing that we saw that night. If anyone has a good answer or has run into something like this, then please do let me know, because it's something that I've thought about a lot. In 2016, I was 26. I worked a seasonal job in a warehouse about 30 minutes drive from my flat. And one day, after work, I ordered Thai takeout from a place maybe 10 blocks from my home. And there was a gas station next door, so I filled up and left my car at the pump to say hi to some friends who lived across the street while I waited for my food to be ready. Maybe 15 minutes of chatting, walking back across the street, grabbing my food, across the lot to the gas station, into my car, and a 2-minute drive to my flat. At the time, I lived in a duplex flat, with a sort of gutted adjacent flat attached to it. Behind me was an old vacant motel that was currently being gutted and repurposed into studio apartments. The nearest building to the left was an old clamper bar leading to the main street and the highway, and to the right was an empty lot where a building that was demolished nearly a decade earlier once stood. The rest of the neighborhood was lower income Hispanic. So I pulled into my drive and noticed a car driving relatively slow past me. I went inside and leashed my dog up to let her out. As I was standing in the yard waiting for the dog to do her business, a maroon Subaru Forester, newer at the time, drove by slowly multiple times before pulling into my driveway. I assumed he was lost or looking for something and walked up to him as he got out of the car and approached me. He looked like an older white man in his 50s. I remember he kind of reminded me of my dad, in fact. I asked him if he needed anything, and he replied, "Oh no, I just was checking on you." I asked if I knew him, figuring maybe I didn't recognize him at first. He replied, "Oh, I saw you up at the gas station. You seemed like you needed help. I'm just seeing if you need anything." Now, I'm usually pretty slow to the cut, but at this point, I'd pieced together that this man had followed me from the gas station to a friend's house, to a restaurant, and then home. It immediately didn't sit right. He was just standing there and he wasn't leaving, and I had time to process the situation. I thought maybe he's an older guy, I'm a younger girl. He's on this side of town in a nice car for whatever reason, and maybe he thinks that I'm a trick. And so I said again, "I'm sorry, I'm not picking up what you're putting down. Why are you here?" "Oh, nothing, I'm just a nice guy checking to see if you're alright." I specifically remember him calling himself a nice guy as well. During the period of this conversation, I had made it to my stoop and he had closed the gap. Behind was door, then me, the dog, then him in his car. I told him, "Listen, you should leave." To which he asked, Do you wish you had a nicer place? And if my dog, a medium-sized German Shepherd, was friendly and even reached out toward her for a pet? I yanked her behind me and said no, and pretty aggressively told him, "Dude, leave." At that, he finally started backing away. I stood in the driveway until he got into his car and drove off. I took down his license plate and car description, then I just went inside. Less than 15 minutes later, though, he pulled back into my driveway, sat there for a second, and then just drove off again. That was when I decided to file a police report. The whole thing just didn't sit right with me, and I just figured that it was nothing, but I lived alone, and if anything happened, I would want a record. It was 6 or 7 p.m. at this point as well, so the non-emergency line was closed. I filed out a report online, and I never heard back from the police. Never saw that man or his maroon Forester again either. He might have just been a weird old man. I never saw any reports of anyone going missing from Nevada in 2016 either. And look, I know it's a bit of a stretch, and maybe it has nothing to do with anything, but I only just thought of this again in the last few months, but they caught a guy in New York, and I wondered if he was in Nevada before it ever came out, because he was the same age, the same build. But how do you remember a face from like 7 years ago, right? I just remember the man at my place having more salt and pepper hair, I guess. He treated me like he thought I was soliciting, and he wanted to help. He didn't respect my boundaries, and it was probably nothing and not the same man, but still, it's scary. And situations like this, they just seem to have a way of sticking with you. Okay, so to start this, I want to say that I'm now an adult, 28-year-old male, and this story, it happened when I was around 15 years old, and to date it still blows my mind. For context, when I was 15, I was a little bit of a pothead. I loved smoking, so whenever I got the chance, which was basically every day, I would get high with my friends. We'll come back to that later, but I grew up in a town in the UK that was pretty big for a town. We had nearly 100,000 residents, so yeah, pretty big. Where I used to live was in like an estate full of houses. I had a best friend at the time who lived about 20 to 25 minute walk from my house, but in order to get there, you had to walk through a wooded area that led to a big lake. You would walk around it to get to near his house. So one day, randomly I was out with my friend, who I just mentioned, plus many others, when we noticed a lot of police presences in the area near the woods. Plus there was a police helicopter up in the air too. Being curious as we were, we followed the police to the woodlands that separated our houses. We went through the woods to the lake where the police and ambulance workers were. They were amongst many bystanders at this point. But we got there and started asking people what had happened, and we were told that a young boy around the age of 7 had drowned in the lake near the path where everybody was gathering. Over the next couple of days, police were trawling the lake looking for the child who they knew was there because his friend ran for help when he fell in and couldn't get out. And 2 or 3 days after he slipped into the lake, authorities found the young boy's body, which was big news in my town. No later than 24 hours after the boy was found, the local council installed a black metal bench on the footpath near where he died with a little plaque commemorating his life. Now, that very next day, I was out with my friend over near where I lived. We were getting high with a bunch of other friends that we knew, and by the time that we were done, we decided to go back to his house to sleep because my mum would have gone crazy over the fact that we were smoking. We started to walk back to his house at around 11 p.m. It was really dark out now. We passed my house and eventually got to the woods. We walked through the woods and got to the start of the lake. We started walking down the side of the lake, down the path towards where the kid had drowned and the bench was. We were just talking nonsense as high teens did when I noticed that when the bench got into sight that there was a man sat on the bench. Now, I was a bit freaked out by this, but I didn't say anything yet. It was 11 p.m. near the woods in the dark, and it was creepy to say the least, but when I got a little bit closer, I noticed that I could see that the man was wearing something like a priest perhaps. Sort of like black jacket, white collar. And upon seeing this priest, I sighed some relief because I just assumed that he was praying or something of the sort for the kid that had drowned in that spot about 4 days earlier. So after noticing this priest, I just sort of watched him sit there. And as I got closer and closer, I didn't say anything to my friend, who was right next to me, but we collectively stopped talking once he noticed the man too. As we got closer, it was more obvious that he was a priest, and then once we got within about 5 meters of him, he was just all of a sudden gone. Like, gone. I felt like I blinked and he had just disappeared. When we were walking past the actual bench where I saw him sat, there was nobody there anymore. But if he was to have gotten up and walked away, I definitely would have seen him. I mean, it's a one-track walkway. In any case, after I got to the bench, I turned to my friend, who was just as confused and spooked as I was, it seemed. I asked if he had just seen that man sat on the bench. I didn't want to say what type of man because the way that he was dressed was very obvious as to what type of man he was. But as I asked him, "Did you see that man?" he said, "Yeah, the guy dressed like a priest." When I tell you that my heart sank, I cannot explain that feeling or that situation to this day. What gets me though is that I purposely asked my friend if he had seen the man, and he corrected me by saying the man was a priest. And if it was a person, they would have had to have gotten up and walked from us in straight line down the path, which we would have seen, or they would have had to have walked past us, but no. When we got close, this guy just disappeared. Still to this day, it's my only paranormal experience, but it blows my mind every single time that I think about it. June 30th, 2014, Calcutta, India. My dad had been in the ICU for nearly a month at this point, in a semi-conscious vegetative state, owing to tubercular meningitis. It was a private hospital, and so it became very difficult to continue with the treatment for financial reasons, and the doctors there had told us that there was no hope either. At that point, we decided to shift him to a renowned government hospital and had to go through a lot of hassles to get him not only admitted to the hospital, but directly into the ICU. So on this very day, we were all set to move him from the private hospital to the government one. The hospital discharged formalities took several hours, and by the time that my dad was put into an ambulance for the shift, it was evening and it started to pour really heavily. My sister and a cousin accompanied my dad in an ambulance, and me with my uncle followed them in a car. After traveling for 45 minutes or so, there came a junction which usually had heavy traffic jams, and we decided to let the ambulance go in that direction, as cops would let the ambulance pass anyway, and once they get past that signal, it would be a relatively quick drive to the next hospital. Me and my uncle took a U-turn to take a different and slightly longer route, which would have less traffic so we could reach the hospital before or at the same time as the ambulance. After taking the U-turn, we continued down the road, and that was when I saw her. An old lady, standing almost in the middle of the road, skin as white as paper. She was wearing a white sari and was holding a thick walking stick. It looked more like a branch from a tree, but staring in the direction where the ambulance went, she didn't have an umbrella with her, and all the shops were closed because of the rising level of water in the street. The water had risen to the point where our driver couldn't take his foot off the accelerator, lest the water might seep in through the exhaust. But me and my uncle, we both saw her, but didn't talk about the experience until a couple of days later. My dad unfortunately passed away on the 13th of July, but to this day, it still baffles me what that lady was doing in the midst of torrential rain like that, in the middle of the road, holding something like a tree branch. And I have never seen someone have such pale and white skin like that. Something was really off about her, and I don't know, she just didn't look right. As a kid, I had a few paranormal encounters that I thought significant, two of which included a black-eyed child that resembled the Ring Girl or the Grudge, but has bangs and looked exactly like a friend that I had in elementary school, only pale white and black-eyed. The first time that I saw her, maybe 50 yards away in the rear view as my dad drove me away. The second time, she was in my room as I went to get something, on her knees on the opposite side of the bed. Anyway, I never paid too much attention to it, and I'm not saying the next encounter was the same thing or related, but I have started wondering if, I don't know, perhaps they are. And while the last one could be dismissed as hallucinations, this one I know for a fact to be real. It was almost 3 years ago, at 5 to 6 a.m. I was being nocturnal at the time, and me and my girlfriend were getting ready to go to sleep. But I went to check the kitchen to get a snack as she followed. I wasn't clear what I was doing, so she asked me, "Where are you going?" Then she said, "What is that?" And I spun around, right as she flicked on the light in the hallway that was right above her. Immediately after she turned it on, just in time for me to see as I just turned around, the light bulb exploded, and a skinny figure resembling the Ring Girl appeared, only very small. Whatever it was, it disappeared with the flash of light from the exploding light bulb, leaving me and my girlfriend absolutely speechless. She said that she exclaimed, "What was that?" because she saw a white mist beside her, which is also why she turned on the light. It is the realest experience that I've ever had, and definitely the most chilling because, well, somebody else saw it this time. Me and that girlfriend broke up now, but the whole 2 years that I was with her, creepy phenomena happened constantly, from the one that I just mentioned to us hearing voices, rhythmic tapping on windows, apparitions, dogs growling at nothing, and one time I even heard stomping running up to me from behind, despite being alone. But nothing like the skinny light bulb figure. Almost all experiences were in the same house, and we both experienced them together and apart, but it was way worse for her, especially when she was alone at the house and I was at work. There were also times in 2 other houses that she claimed to see someone laying beside her, facing her, despite being alone. I will also mention that I never experienced things so real, even in that house, until I got with her, and weirdly enough, everything ceased when we broke up. Not had many things happen since then, and it's been about a year now. But any thoughts? Was my ex haunted? Can people even be haunted? Is the Ring Girl or figure like her from folklore or something? If you have any information, then please do share because I'm still scratching my head. My friend and I are both young females, small petite builds. We had been drinking at a hotel and decided to walk to the main strip, maybe about a 20-minute walk at around 9:45 p.m. We are laughing, listening to music, and just having plain fun at this point, when out of nowhere, a lady pops out in front of us. She obviously looks like she's on something. She's twitching, walking super funny, and she's on the phone. So my friend and I step around her because she was initially going the opposite way of us. When all of a sudden she walks past us, and while she's getting ahead of us, she's looking back and speaking into the phone. I, for some reason, was already feeling kind of uncomfortable, so my friend and I slowed down to let her stay in front of us, but we decided to go to the other side of the street because, why not, right? The lady sees this, speaks into the phone again, and crosses with us all of a sudden. I was trying to give her the benefit of the doubt, thinking that maybe she's uncomfortable and feels unsafe, and is trying to use us as cover, but my gut was telling me otherwise at this point. So, while she's walking in front of us, she's still frequently looking back and talking into the phone, but we cross the street again to put some distance between us. This time, the lady almost turns down a street, where a man wearing all black walks out, and in the same direction that we are going. The lady stops at this cross street and just stares at us, then she steps behind some kind of bush all of a sudden. The man, he went about 300 feet in front of us on the opposite side of the street, and then turned around and walked back to the same cross street the lady was at. We were still speed walking, so where they supposedly stepped off to was now out of sight. My friend, though, was a local to the town that I was staying in, so she was already calling a friend who lived 2 blocks down to come and get us. Around this time, I look back and suddenly see both of them speed walking toward us. At this point, I'm trying to make obvious that I noticed them by turning around, pointing and yelling. Luckily, when they're about 2 blocks away, her friend arrived and we got in the car and we just sped off. This was all years ago in 2019, during the summer. I was 15 and I was staying at my friend's house while my family was traveling because it was my first summer job. The house that I was staying in particular was at the end of a moderately dingy neighborhood on the top of a hill next to a church. I was sleeping in a spare room, and between it and the rest of the house was a large room with an office, a sort of nook facing the living room on the other side of the wall, and a kitchenette with a big window above the sink on the other side of the room. Well, one particular night, after my work, I was doing laundry, and as I set the basket of clothes on the counter of the kitchenette, a really cold chill went up my spine, and I suddenly felt goosebumps rise all over my body. As I felt this, I looked up at the window, and in the reflection of the room, because it was dark out and the windows act like mirrors, I saw a pitch-black shadow almost to the ceiling with a distinct head and shoulders dart right behind me from the bedroom that I was in and straight through the wall into the living room where my friend's mum was watching TV. I stood there, dumbfounded, and while still with goosebumps and that chill, I went to the living room and his mum looked like she felt something too. I told her what had just happened, and she replied that she believes the house could be haunted, and my friend's younger sister felt that someone was watching her in her room often as well. A few years before that happened too, I have a memory of my friend and I in that living room watching TV. His living room was interesting, where one wall was sort of made of framed glass that was warped into a pattern, and slightly frosted, so like you couldn't really see perfectly through it. It was night, and I remember we both looked up from the TV and saw a dark mass through the glass that really shouldn't have been there because there was never anything on the other side of that wall that could cast a shadow like that. I also remember me saying, "Is that your dad?" But unless his dad took a bath in black paint, then I don't know what it could have been. They have since moved to a nicer area, and I haven't had any other weird happenings in my life, other than a possible UFO when I was younger. But I still think about what I saw, and I know what I saw, and I felt something that day. So this happened quite a long time ago when I was just 20 years old. At the time, I was living alone in an apartment in a notorious building near the center of my city. It was a Saturday night, and I'd been going out with friends and my now partner. Because it was past 4 a.m. already, he and his friend drove me and my close friend back to my building. She lived near me, so she only had to walk about maybe 1 minute home, but it was difficult to get by car. We said our goodbyes, and my friend started walking towards her place. while his friend stayed in the car. We made out for a few minutes until some guy started hollering from one of the balconies of my building. I felt a bit embarrassed by the publicity of our makeout session, so for me, that was the cue to say goodbye and go inside. I walked to the entrance, and as I entered the building, a guy walked down the stairs. I didn't think much of it, so I just pressed the button for the elevator simply because I didn't feel like taking the stairs to the 6th floor, where I lived. The man, maybe a few years older than me, asked if I had a cigarette. I told him no, sorry, to keep it short and simple. He just nodded, kept staring at me, and stood next to me waiting on the elevator. I felt a bit creeped out by this, but decided to still wait for the elevator and just get home as quickly as I could. At this point, I naively thought maybe he would have just left once the elevator arrived, but he didn't. Once the elevator doors opened, he stepped inside and just waited for me. I got inside the elevator and noticed he didn't press any buttons. I got a weird gut feeling too, so I excused myself and told him that I needed to call a friend. He grabbed my arm at this point and tried to pull me back inside the elevator, saying, No, come here. I told him louder, let go, I really need to make this call, and I pulled my arm hard to free myself. I almost ran outside, but I really didn't know where to go at this point. I was afraid to go back inside, but it was so late that I didn't feel safe outside either, so I just started walking away from my complex and called my friend. She asked me where I was so that she could come to me, but her phone died before I could answer. I didn't know my partner well back then, so I felt really uncomfortable and almost embarrassed to reach out to him, but I did anyways. The need to get somewhere safe was bigger than my embarrassment, and I didn't know anyone else who would still be up at this time. I had just enough juice left in my phone to text him, and once he got to know what I was going on, he and his friend came racing towards me. They were there within 5 minutes, parked the car, and escorted me back home. By the time that we got to the building, the guy was nowhere to be found anymore. They still decided to escort me home to my apartment, and they stayed with me for a while too, until the sun came up, and I felt comfortable enough to go to sleep again. I had 3 locks on my doors at that time, so as soon as they left, I locked myself in and I went to sleep. I did report it to my landlord, but he couldn't help since the security cameras often didn't work and happened to be offline that evening too. I told him about the guys on the balcony as well, because I didn't know if he was one of them and therefore saw me going back alone or something, but the landlord told me that no one with that description lived on that side of the floor, so that was odd. Looking back, I'm really grateful for trusting my gut instinct and just getting the heck out of there when I did. I don't know if he would have done anything, but it was a weird situation regardless, and it definitely could have ended badly. August of 2022. I'm up with my daughter in the nursery in the middle of the night, and I hear the distinct sound of someone coming from downstairs, opening the drawers in the kitchen, and then what sounded like they were cutting veggies or something. My parents are staying with us for a few weeks to help with the new baby, and the guest room is downstairs, so I figured that it's my mum getting snacks. But all of a sudden, my hair stands on end, because something just doesn't feel right. Now there's this overwhelming sense that someone is in the house. I got up to walk to the kitchen. It's just out of sight from where I was sitting in the nursery. And as soon as my foot crosses the threshold of the nursery doorway, the noise abruptly stops. I go to the kitchen, and when I do, there's nobody in there. Then I get this weird feeling that whatever was making that sound may have been trying to lure me away from my little girl. I walked straight back into her room and checked on her, and she was fine, but I'm freaking out by this point. I went to check out our cameras to see if anyone had gotten up, and both upstairs cameras had been turned off. but I know that I 100% heard someone in the kitchen. I'm still sitting here with my daughter, and I'm not sure what to make of all of this, but I'm definitely freaked out. January of 2023. Well, things have really died down a bit, and I haven't noticed anything for a while, but recently some new things have started happening. Namely, items in her room have been falling off shelves. I would notice things were strangely on the floor, like a stuffed animal or her white noise machine. I know that this seems rather innocuous, and it seemed that way to me too, until I actually saw it happen. I was standing in the nursery holding my daughter when the baby monitor fell to the floor. In fact, it would probably be more accurate to say that it looks like it was pushed off the ledge on its own, and it hit the ground a few feet away rather than directly underneath where it sits as you would expect something falling on its own to do. And just now, I heard a loud noise on the baby monitor, and on the corner of the video feed you can see a large package of formula in her closet fall to the floor. The package is of tins of formula, not something that tips over easily, and the way it was sitting, there's just really no way it should have fallen. I'm getting concerned that whatever was happening before is back in some way, and it scares me that my baby seems to be at the center of all of this. March of 2023. So, today, while I was feeding my daughter, she choked on her food, like full on. My wife ran to get the de-choker, and I ripped her out of her high chair and gave her back thrust until she got it out. I held her and calmed her down, and just as she gets quiet, my wife and I both distinctly hear a child laughing from somewhere in the house. When I heard it, I looked up at her and she was giving me the same look, and we both whispered in unison, "What the heck was that?" I haven't told my wife about the other things that I've been noticing. I still don't know what's going on, truthfully, but whatever it is, I don't think that it caused my daughter to choke on her food, but I do think that it enjoyed it. We purchased our first house April of 2020, me a 32-year-old male and my wife 27-year-old female. The house, it was built in 1922, and the thought crossed my mind that we may see or hear things, but it has never really bothered me in the past, so I didn't worry too much. But the first thing that happened to me here was definitely the most extreme experience that I've had. My wife likes to collect those limited edition Starbucks cups, and they open at 5 a.m. the day that they were being released, and it's always first come first serve, so she leaves the house a little after 4 a.m. to go and get them. As soon as she left, I hear her driving down the driveway, and I get this very weird feeling that I wasn't alone and felt like something was watching me. I laid there for a bit and brushed it off as me getting into my own head and managed to fall back asleep. Now, I have a habit of lucid dreaming or having extremely real feeling dreams, and this time my dream starts as me sleeping in bed in our bedroom in the new house. There was this very angry dark figure with a lady's voice that starts yelling at me. I woke up and I couldn't move. I can't recall anything that was said, if it was even intelligible, but I remember feeling this strong force pushing down on my entire body, dragging me off the bed feet first. Once I was on the floor, I was in a position where my head and shoulder were against the wall and the rest of me was on the floor, still with this same pressure, like someone was holding me down on the ground, and I couldn't move, all while the yelling was occurring. Then I just remember waking up thinking that I was on the floor, and I took a few seconds to realize that I was actually still in my bed, shaking and out of breath. I think that I was yelling in my sleep or something, but still, with that strong weird feeling that I wasn't alone, I was freaked out. Luckily, it was almost dawn at this point, so I got up for the day. Once it became light out, the feeling went away. We burned sage that day, and Everything seemed to be fine after that. My second experience here, though, was about a year later. A combination of things happened. The first bit is that my wife witnessed one of our cats hissing at what appeared to be nothing. A few days later, she had left for work on a Saturday and I was home. I walked down into the basement to check out how much oil we had left because it had been cold for a couple of weeks. And when I go back to the center of my basement, heading towards the stairs, I hear 3 very loud knocks, almost like someone was knocking very loudly on the front door, but it sounded like it was directly above me, which, where I was, would have been in the main hallway upstairs, right by the living room. I headed upstairs and checked both doors, but when I did, nothing. All the cats were on the bed or cat tree, plus a cat couldn't have made those sounds by any means. But again, that night we burned a lot more sage throughout our entire house, and everything has been quiet since. I guess the only common factor here is that we're alone for every encounter, never have experienced anything together. Either way, I'm not too worried about it. This stuff doesn't bother me too much, I guess, but if it takes some sage once a year or so, then that's fine by me. But that's my experiences so far, and here's hoping that it doesn't get worse. So my boyfriend and I are currently hiking the Pacific Crest Trail in California. It's extremely common to get hitches along the trail, and most people who live in towns bordering the trail are fairly kind. They're also safe-seeming folk. Emphasis on seeming. Well, today, we found ourselves a little lost after trying to take a less-traveled alternative trail to avoid the snow-covered main trail. After lots of struggle and practically bushwhacking, we made our way down the hill and ended up accidentally on someone's property. This property is big. It's a large ranch with a few different buildings. But we tried to skedaddle as fast as possible off the property, but one of the ranch dogs saw us and the owner came off in a golf cart. I explained that we accidentally got lost hiking and apologized, and he said that it happens often. He was super understanding. He asked us if we wanted a ride into town since he was about to leave anyways. Given how common hitching is on trail and how nice he was, we accepted and he drove us to town. Now, on the ride there, he told us that he used to be in the DEA and had participated in more shootouts than people fighting in the army. Weird, but okay, didn't think much of it. I noticed my boyfriend was really quiet though and thought that it was odd. But as soon as we hop out of the car, my boyfriend grabs our backpacks and tells me to check my phone. He had sent me an article about the guy that we had just got a ride from, and how this guy was involved in his girlfriend's disappearance and a suspicious death on the ranch property not too long after. Apparently, his girlfriend went missing 2 weeks after signing property transfers of her ranch over to him. She was never found, and the suspicious death on the ranch was a worker who got killed by an ATV, but toxicology showed a meth overdose. Given his DEA background, I found that part especially suspicious. Also, he is on the sex offender registry for groping 2 women on a snowmobile tour, apparently. So yeah, this article, it definitely shook me. My boyfriend and I are 100% okay, but yeah, like I said, just shook that we got a hitch from a possible murderer. And to be honest, after researching and reading everything, I think that he did it. Be careful who you get hitches from, I guess, even if they may seem friendly. A few days ago, my girlfriend and I, the young 20s, were on the home stretch of a big road trip with our dog. As it had been a while since we last stopped, we pulled into a rest stop off of a freeway to stretch our legs and have Doggo take a dump. When we pulled into the rest stop, there were no cars and 3 big semi-trucks parked in a line. Immediately, my girlfriend got out to go into the next room. I leashed up the dog and stood next to the car, and as she was walking towards the entry door, I thought that I heard someone yell behind me. To my surprise, it was a trucker in the driver's seat of his truck with the window rolled down, trying to get my attention. Now, I'm generally a pretty friendly person towards all people, whether they seem shady or not, generally willing to help a hand. Behind me in the truck was an older gentleman, large with grey hair and sunglasses. His truck was so loud that I really couldn't hear what he was saying, so I yelled back, "What?" The trucker yelled something inaudible 3 more times as I asked him what, while shaking my head and holding up my heads to inform him that I couldn't hear him. At this point, he seemed visually annoyed that I said "what" 4 times. Okay, that's understandable. I wanted to see what the deal with this guy was, so I walked halfway between the car and his passenger side truck. "What did you say?" I asked. "Can you help me look for my phone? I lost it somewhere," the trucker said. At this point, I was super caught off guard, as this had all unfolded within the 20 to 30 seconds that we parked at the rest stop. To me, it was weird that a trucker was asking a random person stopping at a rest stop to help look for their phone, but maybe he just wanted me to call it. "Where did you lose it?" I asked. I lost it in my truck. Can you come up here and help me look for it?" The trucker replied in a really unnerving tone. In that moment, I was really sketched out. I thought that I was about to be abducted. Phone call I could do, but no way was I about to get into his trucker's cab to look for his phone. "Yeah, I'm good," I said sternly, but half-heartedly, as I almost thought that this guy was joking with me. After a few moments, the trucker then says, "You won't help me look for it?" My adrenaline was pumping, so I yelled back, "Get out of here," in a threatening tone, knowing that I had nothing to defend us should something go wrong. I put Doggo back in the car and pulled out my phone to pretend that I was calling the cops, while he slowly drove and then stopped again to ask if I was going to help. I then screamed again, "No, get out of here, I'm calling the cops." And after that reply, he stepped on the gas and exited the freeway. I stood and watched when finally my girlfriend exited the rest stop, wondering why I looked like I'd just seen a ghost. I don't know if it was an overreaction, but it sketched me out that he asked me to get into his truck like that. So, the hubby and I worked together at the time that this happened, drove to and from work together daily. Note too that we had a pet cat named Sammy, but nobody else lived with us and we owned our home, so no landlords coming in while we were out or anything like that. And one day, we come home from work and there is on the floor, in the middle of the kitchen, an egg. One single egg, no cracks and in perfect condition. The weird part? We had no eggs, none in the fridge. Didn't eat them often, so we had those frozen egg whites that come in a cardboard carton. No actual eggs, and hadn't had any in the house for a real long time. We scratched our heads about that, threw the egg away, and that was that. Until the next day, we come home and there's another egg, again right in the middle of the kitchen floor. Now, we're getting freaked out. Once was weird enough, but twice? We considered cracking this one open, but we decided against that and we just threw it out. Weirdly too, it never seemed to happen again. And to this day, many years later, we mention the time that Sammy laid eggs in the kitchen, but have yet to come up with any sort of plausible explanation for what it was. The whole thing was just bizarre. I was tree planting near Smithers, BC, about an hour and a half into the mountains on dirt roads. I've really tried my best to forget that this incident ever happened, because I just cannot find a way to rationalize any of it. So, it was almost midnight and I was trying to sleep in my tent. My tent was near a bunch of standing dead trees that would creak when the wind picked up. It was a very loud and distinct sound. And on this particular night, it was dead silent and still though. I started to hear sticks cracking and steps being taken that seemed to slowly get closer over the course of about maybe 15 minutes. It was loud enough that I was certain that there was a bear approaching my tent, and it got so close that it had to be no further than 15 feet from it. Cracking sticks and padding around the forest floor, I decided to yell out very loudly, but there was silence. I was answered with nothing but deafening silence. No sound of the creature fleeing or doing anything at all. I just sort of sat there in silence, scared to move, trying to rationalize to no conclusion. About 20 minutes of dead silence later, I heard the eeriest, unnatural and unexplainable noise that I've ever heard. It was the exact same timbre and volume, and just basically the same sound as the trees outside creaking, but instead of being a sort of regular creak, it began and then held the exact same note of a creak for a full 5 seconds or even longer. It was like an unnatural drone that was obviously not a tree creaking. Mind you, there was not a hint of wind or any other trees creaking as per usual. I don't know what that was, but what I'm trying to say is that it was unnatural and weird. I got barely any sleep that night, and the next day was really tough. I just tried to forget about it, but I never did make the connection that skinwalkers are known to imitate sounds like that until maybe a few weeks ago. This happened in July of 2022, and I don't know, it was a weird experience. I'm not saying that it was a skinwalker, but it was strange. If anyone has had any similar experiences or has any ideas of what this could have been, then I would sure love to hear it. For this story, we have to rewind a bit until last summer. That was the night of August the 12th, specifically, and it was the night that the meteor shower was happening. With the intention of watching the meteor shower, my partner and I packed a towel and some takeout dinner and headed to a huge park in our city. In this park, there's this big wooded area that we thought was ideal to watch the sky, since it was almost in pitch darkness. We had to use our phone flashlights to navigate it, and chose a place to lay down our towel, just so you can picture how dark it was. We get there, we turn off the flashlight, and I play some chill music on my phone. We were both looking at the sky, but if we looked around us, it was completely pitch black. The only light was in the horizon line. Now, it may seem irrelevant at this point, but I was wearing a sundress that had to be tied around the waist, and I untied it to be more comfortable in the position that I was laying. After 5 or 10 minutes of unsuccessfully trying to see a shooting star, I lower my sight and start taking notice of our surroundings. And to my left, my boyfriend is sitting to my right, still looking at the sky. I notice some movement. I try to focus my eyes on it. I only see a brief outline, but I can tell that there's somebody or something approaching us. My first thought was, oh, there's a dog, but for some reason I feel unsettled and I cannot take my eyes off of it. As it comes closer and I can see more of it, the distant lights in the horizon line sort of light this thing up, and I tell my partner that there's something coming towards us. I think it might be a dog. Before I even finished the sentence though, it hit me. It wasn't a dog. It's a man, but he's crawling on all fours in a sort of animalistic way with his chest close to the ground. My boyfriend, he saw it too, bolted onto his feet. I felt paralyzed in fear while he urged me to get up. He said to me, "I'll grab our stuff, you have to get up." I was trying to tie my dress back up, but I was so nervous that I couldn't. "Come on, we need to leave," he said. He took my hand and we started rushing through the woods towards the lit part of the park. I couldn't stop looking back. We were both very shaken up by it, but we eventually got out of there, and I was so thankful that I wasn't alone in the woods that night. I would like to tell you guys about an unsettling experience that I had about maybe 10 years ago now in the fall. I was born in and still live in Lewisberry, PA. My younger years were spent back near the old observatory, around Moores Mountain Road and Observatory Drive, if you know the place. But even then I could sense that this area was a little bit off. The woods were just not quite right. Open fields seemed, like eerie. The roads never seemed to go the exact places you thought they did. Moores Mountain Church boasted Spook Hollow, which was a logging road that just kind of padded out that reeked of being creepy. But anyway, most nights I will drive down to New Cumberland for a cold beer and some darts, and one night in October of 2012, it was no different. On the return trip, not long after midnight, I was on Route 382, headed eastwards Lewisberry. As I was approaching John Brenneman's place, up on the right, just before Brenneman Drive, I saw someone walking towards me, along the side of the road. True, it was late, but it was rather mild for October, so it wasn't out of the question that somebody might be walking along the road. But what was odd is that he was very tall, 6'6" or taller at least, and really, really thin. In the few seconds that I was looking at him, I noticed that he seemed to be dressed all in black, with black pants, a tight black trench coat, very, very dark skin, and also short dark hair. He was either limping or having trouble walking. As I sort of debated slowing down, maybe somebody had had an accident, he then, all of a sudden, dropped down to all fours and quickly scampered across the road in front of me. He has a face that was, as I said, coal black, but now that I get a better look at him, it's sort of a cross between what I can only describe as human and canine. And then, he was gone. When I got home, I hadn't really thought much about it, but over the next day or two, it really started to give me the creeps. Obviously, I didn't say anything to anyone for a few days, but then I told a few close friends. Being self-employed and fearing derision, I was reticent to make much ado about it. Although I have always been an enthusiast of the paranormal, cryptozoology, ghosts and such, I've always been a dyed-in-the-wool skeptic, I guess you could say. I can't explain what I saw or begin to postulate what it was. I only know that I saw it and it creeps me out. I did do some research, and the closest that I came to as a picture was like one in Texas, a stilt walker, which, yeah, you can have a look at that online if you'd like to get a bit of an idea of what it looked like. This happened about 9 years ago and sometimes comes to my mind. Whenever it does, it always creeps me out. So, I was on an adult dating site, one of the fetish types. I know, don't judge me. I just was looking for some fun. And anyway, I was stupid and gave out more information than I probably should have. I was chatting with a guy. He asked me at some point what I did for work. At the time I was working at a McDonald's, so I told him. He asked which one, and I stupidly told him which one it was. We chatted off and on. We hadn't been chatting for too long, and I also stupidly gave him my phone number at some point. He would talk about how he wanted to meet me on my break and have some fun on my break. I told him no thanks. I don't bring my lifestyle to my job. Anyway, I checked my messages just before I was due to clock out of work, and luckily I did, because he mentioned that he was at my job and told me that he ordered a Big Mac meal. I was like, oh, okay, well, don't expect me to do anything with you. I'm not interested. He then got upset and apparently wasn't accepting that I wasn't interested. I was also scared because I hadn't sent him a face picture of myself, but I had never received one from him either. I really wasn't too interested in him, so I decided that I didn't need a face picture since I likely wasn't going to meet up with him anyway. his interests weren't what I was looking for, and I have a hard time straight up saying that I'm not interested, and just slowly started to ghost whoever I had no interest in, really. Now, luckily, I hadn't told him my work schedule, so he didn't know that I was about to clock out. So I, after clocking out, told one of my managers that I was on a dating site and some guy just showed up to my work, and I have no idea what he looks like, and that I was going to hang out in the back in the break room for a bit. Luckily, she didn't judge me and was like, "Oh, okay." So I waited for about half an hour before I left. I didn't have a car at the time and I had to walk home as well, and I was afraid that he would see me and try to pick me up in his car. Luckily, no one followed me, so I seemed to be in the clear. But it creeps me out that some random person just decided that he would show up to my job and expect me to want to meet up with him like that. It was foolish of me to walk home that night too. I mean, anything could have happened. But this whole experience opened my eyes, thankfully, and made me more aware of the information that I give out to strangers. I've definitely learnt my lesson, and I won't be doing that again. That's for sure.